this webinar is going to be mentoring the class of 2015. I'll present for maybe 40 minutes, maybe 45, and then for the last part of the webinar, we're going to open it up to a discussion, because this topic truly is done best when we have an interactive discussion, because I know there are multiple people listening in today that have done mentoring and have information to share that is going to benefit all of us. So I just would like to acknowledge my co-author, Ms. Megan Bosley, who presented in July. If you were at the seminar in July, you probably saw her. I think we're going to lose her to medical. She did very well on her MCAT, and I think her career is going to become a doctor. I just hope she takes my insurance when she's in clinical practice. So with that, here's what we're going to discuss for the next 40 minutes or so. We're going to talk about what is mentoring in the context of professional engineering and why it's important to us. We're going to talk about some of the typical discussion topics that people want to discuss when in the mentoring relationship with somebody that's a protege. We're going to ask, what does a recent graduate seek in a mentor, and we're going to explore that a little bit. We're going to touch upon the topic of communication styles. This is an interesting issue. It does come up repeatedly that the folks coming out of college today do have some differences in how they communicate from those of us that maybe graduated some years or even decades ago. And then we're going to have a discussion, and we're going to I'm going to have some questions for you, and I'm going to ask you to ask your questions of me. So let's think back to the start of our career, and I want you to think back to when you started in the practice of engineering. How did you learn? Most specifically, I'd like to explore the topic of how did you learn to have professional judgment, because that's going to be the underlying theme here, is that mentoring does develop professional judgment. How did you learn about your organization? There are many things, from where do you find coffee to how do you do an expense report, that's not taught in college. Did someone assist you along the way? And if so, what was it that brought you together with that person? What worked, and more importantly, what didn't work in the way of learning the profession by this type of a relationship? And I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts with me at the end of the presentation. I'll give you just a little background in my own case, and part of why this topic means so much to me is when I graduated from Purdue University, it was a long time ago, 2000, I wish it were, 1977. When I graduated in 1977, I was commissioned a naval officer and sent to the group in Washington, D.C. that designs the nuclear power plants for the submarines, cruisers, and carriers. And I got there, and I had a pretty good academic feel from Purdue, but I really didn't understand the practice of engineering. I really didn't know how to look at a piping system and really understand what that meant. You know, simple things like this. Several of the older engineers worked with me, and when I expressed an interest in becoming a registered PE, I actually had multiple people in the organization at fairly senior levels that were already professional engineers that were willing to take the time to work with me. And as I prepared to take the test, I spent a number of hours with these people going over the practice problems and also pouring through our own drawings and calculations. So they were able to share with me exactly how our ships had been engineered and the underlying philosophy. I can tell you that I gained more in that maybe year and a half that I did that intensely than I had gained really in the previous 6.5 to 7 years since I had started college. So I imagine that there are multiple people that feel similarly, and I want to hear about those stories when we get to the end of the discussion. Let's provide a definition of mentoring. And this is the definition that we came up with, and it seems to have withstood the test of time. Mentoring as applied to professional practice, that's what we do, is the passing on by the mentor, and I don't know why that keeps popping up, but is the passing on by the mentor of the art of professional practice and the perspective of the professional to the protege through explanation and demonstration in the context of a direct and extended relationship. So what are the key points I'm making here? We're talking professional practice. We're talking passing on from the mentor to the protege the art of professional practice, and more importantly, their perspective. And we're demonstrating this in the context of a direct relationship where we can explain and demonstrate what we mean by that. So there's two types of mentoring, and so there's the magic number. We define two types of mentoring. The first is a formal and structured arrangement, and this is very typical of the military. For example, in the military, I had a qualification book, and I was required to go through that qualification book, and I was required to gain particular skills and demonstrate them. And there were people that were assigned to me to be my mentors in that process. So it was formal, it was organized by the organization, and I had the responsibility of tracking down my mentors, and okay, I'll say yes to that. I had the responsibility of tracking down the mentors and getting them to work with me. The second type of mentoring, which I think is more typical of today, is the informal. And my co-author, Megan, is a great example of this. When she came to work in her first job out of college, she sought out a mentor. There was no formal relationship. She sought out a mentor, and she asked that person if that person would work with her. She picked a mentor that had gone to the same school as her, had a similar major, and they worked together, and the two of them then worked out the particular topics that were discussed. So the pace of the learning was in accordance with what they felt was the appropriate pace. Two types of mentoring, there they are, formal versus informal. Formal is more structured, informal is more conversational. So why is this important? If you think about the whole process of licensing, and a little background, when Kim first approached me on this topic back about 5 years ago, what she had observed is that we're pretty good about educating people in college and giving them the fundamentals of engineering. We're good about that, and we do test them to make sure that they know that before they go to the next step of professional practice. But that next step of professional practice, those 4 years after college and before the principles and practices test, that really depends on the engineering graduate being able to work with experienced engineers to develop a sense of judgment. And there's the big one, that sense of judgment. She felt that it would be good if we started talking about this because it was important to the professional engineering practice that we continue to develop our younger engineers. I know what I've observed over 35 years of professional practice is that there's a lot less practicing engineers in the given workplace today to help younger engineers than there were 35 years ago. So what we're doing when we are mentoring these younger engineers is we are giving them a sense of how we make engineering judgments, what's important and what isn't important. We're helping them understand practically how to apply what they've learned in college. For example, approaching the computation of stresses in a structure. It can be very daunting to somebody who's only learned it in college to apply that to a real structure, but I think most of us that have done this in the real world have our ways of approaching it. We pass those along. Same with fluid systems, electrical systems, etc. We also are teaching them how to deal with issues such as balancing the needs of our clients, our employers, and our suppliers, dealing with workplace customs, that's a big one, and how to communicate and literally survive in the workplace, and applying the principles of ethics. Ethics is something that is very challenging. It is not taught in college, or at least it wasn't when I went through, and I don't believe it is currently. Let me back up here. What we do in our work is we help the younger engineers to understand truly how to apply an ethical judgment in real-world situations where it is far from black and white and generally gray. So there's also a benefit for our proteges, and this comes from some of Megan's input. It mitigates the stress. Megan said that when she got out of college, it was very stressful to learn the duties of her new job and to apply those, and it helped a great deal to her that she had someone she could talk to and say, how do we approach this problem? And how should I go forward with this? Another item that comes up is how an individual fits into the big picture. A recent engineering graduate may be assigned a role where they're doing a small piece of a larger program. Having the mentor's input helps them understand how their piece fits into that larger perspective. They may be doing a very vital piece of the program, but they may not realize how vital it is without that benefit. So the end effect, and I think this is the big takeaway, is that mentoring transforms the graduate engineer into the professional engineer. And that is probably the salient point of the presentation today. So I'd like you to think about any other points, because I know there are other benefits of mentoring, and I want to hear about those in a few minutes. So what are some of the typical discussion topics? Well, a big one that comes up repeatedly is applying theory to practice. Let's face it, most engineering systems are very complex. There's a lot of details, and it can be overwhelming to look at all this and to even understand how to start with something. For folks who do structural engineering, picture how complex a structure truly is and how many details there are. For folks that do fluid systems, think about how many details there are in that. Same with electrical, with chemical. I could keep on going. I hope I haven't slighted anybody. Biomedical is extremely complex. One of the things that I think we may do intuitively and not even realize we're doing it is we visualize how the essential details and how to get to what's really truly important in all that complexity. That's something that we can pass along to our graduate engineers. Doing simple hand calculations to scope in a design. I know that I've done multiple finite element simulations, and they're very complex, and they give me very precise information about many, many parts of the design, but do I really trust it? And I think many of us have developed the habit of doing some simple sanity checks. They could be hand calculations, they could be something else, but we do something in our mind to box in the answer that we would expect so that we have more trust in the simulation and more trust that we truly have designed this properly. A big one is the issue of past practice. I know that when I joined the Navy Nuclear Propulsion Program, one of the guiding principles was past practice. They told me that part of the reason that they were able to turn out new ships as quickly as they did, which is utterly amazing considering how much goes into one, is that they were guided by past practice. They tended to always start with the last few designs and take those design details and then move them forward. And I know in my career that being able to look at past practice and see what I could tease out of that to go forward with in new designs has been just vital. And then the last item is understanding the role of standards. That is very critical, and I'll share with you that just before coming over here, I was with my client who is a major manufacturer of medical equipment at Underwriters Laboratories in Northbrook, Illinois, which is about 10 minutes from where I'm conducting this webinar. And we were down there to make use of their 10-meter EMC, electromagnetic compatibility chamber, because the medical devices have to adhere to certain international standards, and Underwriters Laboratories is a approved facility for doing that testing. Those standards are vital. If these products don't pass, we can't sell them. We can't put them into human use. That's something definitely that is not taught in college. The other item that comes up is company-specific processes and practice. Simple things like, where do I find information in the file system? That can be daunting. We might know it now because we've been through it multiple times, but some people might not even realize that they don't know what they don't know, that there's information available to them that they may not even know exists. And part of our mentoring is to give them a sense of where do you go to look for things. And then a big one that I personally find very important is preparing work products for design or peer reviews. I know in the medical device industry, which is where I've focused maybe for the last 14 years, peer review is essential of everything. Software is peer reviewed, electrical designs are peer reviewed, mechanical is peer reviewed, verification testing. getting work products in a state where somebody else can go through and understand what I did is a huge thing. And that's something that I believe that we create a great deal of value when we are able to pass along to our proteges how to prepare their work products for the reviews. Some of the other items that come up, and I think this is very important, I'm using the politics in here, but all workplaces have a certain cadence to them and a certain culture to them. And it may not be obvious to somebody coming into the organization to even pay attention to those things, but that's something that we can share with our proteges. What is the proper conduct in the office? Simple things. Two of the very fine young engineers that I'm mentoring right now, the first question that they asked me the first week they came to the company was, how should we dress? They had been in college, in graduate school, they had dressed a certain way, now they're in a workplace environment, and it was a question to them. So we went through the appropriate choices for the workplace depending on whether you're in the laboratory, whether you're perhaps meeting the clients, meeting with FDA people, etc. And also there's issues of culture and politics that can be very important and can be minefields, and we can give our people some, some sense of what's important and what isn't. This all speaks to the whole issue of corporate survival and promotion. I think many people don't realize the need, especially in today's economy, to demonstrate that not only are we proficient in what we do, but that what we do brings value to the organization. So as I like to say, it's demonstrating that we do things right, but also demonstrating that we do the right thing. Definitely that's an area that we probably inherently or instinctively do and can be, and that's something that may not be obvious, but that we can pass along really to the people that we're mentoring. And then the last item that comes up, and Megan is dealing with this right now in her career, is evaluating the benefits and risks of special assignments and projects. That's something that may not be obvious up front, but if someone young is asked to take a special assignment or take on a project, it can be either very beneficial or detrimental to their career, and they may not know everything that they would need to know to make a good informed judgment. I know Megan recently was offered an opportunity to work over in the regulatory affairs group of her company, and she and I debated that for a long time. She finally concluded that it was beneficial to her, and particularly so given that she's thinking that the next thing on her list is to become a medical doctor. But there were good questions that she asked, and I really do hope that we made the right decision there. Time will tell. So another item that comes up is the issue of collaborative networks. I think all too often people tend to get in their own silo, and I don't think that they realize that a good part of professional practice is that you get to know people in other departments so that you have a sense of who you can go to when questions arise that maybe cross disciplines or cross boundaries. The same holds true with your business partners. I think those of us that have clients recognize the value of building collaborative networks with those clients. Certainly it is very beneficial when doing work, particularly when we really want to understand at a deeper level not just what a client says, but what a client truly needs. The same thing holds true with suppliers. And then the last is building with the professional engineering community. I think that that's vital, that people realize just how much value there is to joining organizations like Illinois Society of Professional Engineers and maybe a professional organization such as ASME or ASCE that's in their community as well. I know that over the years I've gotten a substantial amount of benefit from having friends and collaborators that were in the professional engineering community that I could call and I could say, hey, what do you know about this? Or where would you go to get more information on this? And it really brings me back to the issue of keeping current with the profession. This is something that distinguishes, give me 1 second. This is something that really distinguishes professional engineering from just pure academics, is that we are required to keep current with the profession. We do take continuing education. I think everybody who I've talked to, and I'm sure everyone on this call today, has had to learn things that maybe they didn't even imagine when they were in school. I know I never would have imagined the use of an iPhone back when I was at Purdue. So keeping up with the profession through continuing education and through self-study is something that we can pass along, that we can share with people. This is why it's important, and these are proven techniques to help you do that. And if you do have any questions along the way and want to type them in, I know that Courtney is keeping track of those. So please feel free if there's something that comes up that you'd like us to drill into at that moment. Else we'll go ahead and we'll cover anything you'd like at the end of the discussion. So there are some other items here, and this particular graphic I love. We have had just a substantial amount of fun trying to figure out what exactly is being discussed between these two people. The one gentleman who clearly has some concern about the plans, and the other gentleman who's looking at it very seriously. So if you have any thoughts as to what they might be saying there, I certainly will take them. Survival is an interesting topic. Survival at the client's office, what to do, what not to do. At the construction site, how to stay safe. The same with being along the right-of-way. I had one position where I was required to go out into the railroads, and it was for the CTA, and there was a third rail. Boy, I'll tell you, I'm glad that I was warned about how to stay away from the third rail. And then on the factory floor or underground. So there's practical things that we can share with people as to really how to stay alive when they're out of the office environment and into construction or factories. And then the last one is survival in social settings. Seminars, conferences, trade shows, giving webinars. There's certainly some good survival tips at formal receptions, banquets, and award ceremonies. Boy, can I share some stories about surviving receptions and banquets. And I know, all kidding aside, I know that when I go back to my co-author Megan, she was invited to an awards banquet, and she had some interesting questions about how to conduct herself at that. And we went through some dress rehearsals as to how to handle that. It was very interesting. It made me think very much about that topic. And so I'm hoping maybe you'll think about any other topics that are good discussion topics for mentoring. So let's talk about what are some of the characteristics that recent graduates seek in a mentor. One of the big ones that keeps coming up over and over and over again is that a good mentor truly makes the time to talk. And that's a hard one because most people that are in mentoring roles, they're very busy. They've got a lot on their plate, and to carve out time to answer the questions of engineering a recent graduate can be challenging. But this is a characteristic that the protégés seem to really value, is making the time to talk. The other one is accessible, and that is when they have a question that we're available to meet with them. The accessibility is an interesting one, and I think this generates a lot of discussion because I know that right now the majority of communication that I have with the two young engineers that I'm mentoring is via text. And sometimes that can be very good because something occurs to them, they ask it, I can answer it quickly. Other times, if I'm in a meeting, it can be very challenging to get back to them. I can offer some thoughts as to how people have said that they handle that issue. We can talk about that again in a few minutes. Demonstrating the commitment to mentoring, that's a big one, that protégés do really expect that their mentors are committed to the mentoring, that it's important to them. And it really boils down to the issue of caring, seeing the mentoring as shaping a future leader. Because if we think about it, what we're doing here very much is we're shaping the future of our profession, because the people that we're dealing with today in 30 to 40 years from now are going to be the leaders of our profession. So if we continue this is an interesting one that comes up, and I found this interesting when it was first raised by some of the panel of people we interviewed to prepare these slides. Time-tested. Pretty much without exception, the people that we interviewed who had been a protégé said that they really wanted to pick people out who were time-tested, who have actually practiced the profession and have been successful at that practice. But similar to that, they also wanted people that have had some failures. And I think we've heard in many cases that failure can be, in many ways, the greatest teacher of all. So they're looking for people that have been successful in the practice of engineering and have also failed, had failures, and have learned from it and have moved forward with it. They want that wisdom. They also tend to want people that have held multiple roles. So they look for folks that have done different things within the profession or within an organization. And here's a big one. They really want people that know what it's like to be in their current role. So they want folks that know what it's like to be a recent engineering graduate and to be doing a particular type of work and to know what it's like to walk into an organization and be overwhelmed. I certainly remember when I walked into the organization and I was definitely overwhelmed. Of course, in those days we sat at drafting tables. Now they're at computer terminals, but really I think it's that same feeling of understanding what it's like to come into an organization and have that feeling that I really don't know which end is up, and I'm hoping that I can find some answers. The last item is they really would like people that are positive, that enjoy the practice of engineering and are optimistic about it. I think we find pretty much without exception, or if there are exceptions, I haven't run into them, that the folks that are involved with Illinois Society of Professional Engineers, they like this profession, and they believe that the work truly does matter and that it is building a better place for all of us. And so they look for people that have that positivity about the profession. Having said that, let's talk about probably the most thorny issue, which are the generational perspectives and communication differences. This is really interesting, and I'd say that in terms of the panelists that we've interviewed to prepare these slides, as well as the literature we reviewed, this seems to get the most discussion. There are some generational perspectives and differences in communication that we are going to encounter. One of the biggest one has to do with the way that young people are educated these days. Critical thinking is really stressed much, much more than it was definitely when I went to school in the 60s and 70s, and maybe up in through the 80s. So people who have gone through the current and I'm going to say this is more true of the United States educational system than other countries. So people who have been educated here in the United States tend to ask why-type questions much, much more than you might first expect. They've been taught to think things through clearly, to have a mind for themselves. And if we say you need to analyze the fluid flow in this piping system, they may ask, why am I doing this? What's the end objective? They're going to need to understand more so the purpose and the goals. You know, what is it that I'm trying to achieve by running this calculation, and what is the goal of this work? What does the fluid system end up doing? And they may want to ask how their task fits into that goal of proving out, let's say, the fluid system. They're also realistic about intercompany moves. They've seen what's happened perhaps to their parents or relatives over these past couple of decades. So when I started in 1977, I worked with people, especially the civilian engineers that were assigned to our group, who had been there in a couple of cases since the Second World War. So these are people that have had 30-plus years in the organization doing the same kind of work. They joined and expected to retire from it. But we know that the reality of the workplace since, I don't know, since the mid-'80s is that it isn't quite that way. So they're realistic about the fact that they may have to move through several companies in order to grow in their career. And what we see is that many people see themselves more of a free agent than a career employee. I can't really comment on that. I wish that things were different, but this is something that we've seen in our surveys. We also have seen that recent graduates may be more comfortable emailing and texting than talking. So we will see this, and I'm seeing this in the time I've been here hanging on the webinar. I've got at least one text. I probably didn't do my due diligence reminding people that from 12 to 1 I'm having lunch with my coworkers and colleagues from ISPE. But anyway, emailing and texting seems to be the preferred method of communication. They're also much more well-versed in computer-based analytical tools. So, for example, the two mentors or two proteges that are working for me right now, they can fire up MATLAB or fire up Excel and write macros and just have a great time. And my eyes kind of gloss over. They're much more comfortable with the analytical tools. The metric system seems to be the much more comfortable preferred measuring system. So they tend to think metric much more than I know my generation did. They see work and career as aspects of a broader life. So they see work in a perspective. Work may not dominate their life. It may not be their life. It may be part of their life. And their primary daily focus may not necessarily be on their career. It may be on something else. They may be motivated to truly make a difference in the world, and that's why they're doing their engineering. Or they may see engineering as a springboard to something else. It could be marketing. It could be sales. It could be medicine. These are some of the generational perspectives that we've identified in our surveys, and I wish that you'd share with me any others that you've noticed. Let's talk about the other side, which are the more experienced engineers. What we observe there is that they're more comfortable talking, maybe more comfortable talking on the phone, maybe more comfortable talking face-to-face. They may have more of a career employee outlook. We may have come into the profession at the point where you still did, in many cases, start at a company or at a firm and stay there through the time you retired. At the beginning of their careers, they may have had more what we call assignment-based work. For example, here, do these calculations, and there really wasn't an opportunity to ask why I'm doing them. The answer generally was, yes, sir. They may be more comfortable with the English or imperial system of units. I know that I think in terms of English. If you said 36,000 PSI is a stress in a beam, I'd say great. Okay, you know that's what I expect as its design yield stress. I'm trying my best to learn the metric system and to get a feel for it, but I'll share with you that I've done so many years and years of working in the English that that's the way my mind still works intuitively. Work and career may be the primary daily focus. Many of us that started in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, maybe work and career is our life. I'm curious to know if you can identify any other generational perspectives that you might see. Those are the ones that we've uncovered, but I know that there are probably others. So I really do want to get to the discussion because I think that's where the real meat of this course comes from. So I'll just offer that this is what we've covered. We've discussed what mentoring is and why it's important. Its importance is it transforms the graduate engineer into the professional engineer. We know there's two main types of mentoring, the structured and the formal structured and the informal unstructured. We know that the typical discussion topics, they vary from how do I do a calculation to how do I handle myself at a awards banquet. The engineering graduates are seeking mentors that are enthused about the profession, are accessible, are willing to talk, and take the mentoring seriously. We see the generational communicational styles, and we see those to a large extent influenced by the availability of the means of communication today, like iPhones, etc., that just didn't exist before. So now I'd like to open it up to the discussion, and I would like to discuss your experience and observations regarding mentoring. I'm hoping you'll tell me your thoughts on mentoring's importance to the profession. Share with me your differences and similarities that you've noticed in communication styles, and then other points. So, Courtney, if you would like, I think we're ready to open the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. If people want to go ahead and enter their questions and their comments into the questions box on the side. We have received a few. The first is corporate survival / politics is very important, especially when your company goes through a buyout or change in control. How do you help a new engineer navigate this when you don't understand it well either?
Oh, that is a great question. And if anybody on the phone has any thoughts about this, please feel free to send a comment. I think that what I've observed that works is the first thing is to be truthful. There are some things that we know and some things that we don't know when it comes to corporate buyouts, mergers, and acquisitions. If we share what we do know with our proteges, that probably is the preferred method of dealing with the situation. Another thing that we can also share is I have to believe that all of us have been through some challenges in our careers, maybe where we've had to move to different companies or different employers. We can share what techniques have worked for us to survive those kind of upheavals. Really the best thing that I can offer is really to share with people that the best security that any of them have is to be good at their job and to strive to be excellent in what they do, and also really to pay heed to making sure that people see the value of what they bring. Again, those two last items are personal opinions based on having to deal with this issue at my previous employer. If anybody has any other thoughts on that, I would love to know. So, how'd I do? Did I answer the question?
I think so. While we're waiting on other responses to either that or other questions, there is another question here, or comment really. As a mentor, you need to understand that they can talk to you and carry on a text message with someone else. At first it may seem rude, and as a mentor you have to accept this as a fact of life.
That is a great point. That is a wonderful point, because I have noticed that repeatedly, that I'm sitting and having a conversation with one of our proteges, and at the same time I'm talking to her, she's periodically reaching down and she's texting. And I know at first I was a bit disturbed by that, but I came to realize that she's able to do that. I have trouble talking and texting personally. My mind tends to be more one channel when it comes to outgoing communication, but I've noticed that she's very good at that, and I at first took it personally, but then I realized that's just the style. And though what I've asked her to do on several occasions is, if I'm dealing with something that has some fine points to it, where maybe I really want her to think and focus, I'll ask her if we could put phones down, and I'll put my phone down, she'll put her phone down, and we'll focus on the issue at hand. But that is a great comment, and thank you for sharing that.
Okay. Someone asks, is mentoring almost always done between a supervisor and employee, or the same employer, or for the same employer?
There are two interesting points in there, and I want to, okay, let me take them on separately. I've generally seen the mentoring done between individuals that work for the same employer, but it doesn't have to be. I think maybe it works more conveniently if people are at the same company, because maybe they're observing the same issues with the company, or they're dealing with the same file system, dealing with the same types of work, etc. And maybe within the confidentiality of the company, there's not a problem sharing details about issues that are being encountered. The second issue concerns supervision, and this is a very interesting one. And I've heard two different approaches on this. And if you have a thought, please share your thought with us. Some people will argue the supervisor is a natural mentor, and that does work. Other people have argued that the supervisor is probably not a good mentor, because the protege really can't share fully with the supervisor, because the supervisor does have to evaluate them and do performance reviews once or twice a year. So I have heard both arguments. Now, some people prefer that their mentor is their supervisor. Other people would prefer not. We can explore that a little further if you would like.
We have a few more questions, Laura, but if you wanted to go into more detail, that's fine.
I don't. That's good. I'm wondering if we should maybe open up the phones. What do you think?
Oh, sure. If you would like to speak, there is an option to raise your hand, and I would be happy to unmute your line so that you can ask the question. As people are contemplating their questions that way, the next question is, how do you deal with a new engineer who, quote, knows everything and sees no value in a mentor?
That's an interesting point. It is a challenge. Notice the sigh there. The only thing I've ever observed that works is to take time, because in some cases it takes a failure before people realize that they really do need to reach out to others. So one thought would be to just be patient and observant, and to be there when that person does have their first failure and realizes suddenly that maybe they don't have all the answers. The second thing is to maybe to get to know them a little bit more as an individual, because I think in a lot of cases that type of behavior may be a mask for insecurity. So it might be possible that the more comfortable that they get with you as a mentor, the more they may be willing to open up and share some of the fears they have that they really don't know what they're doing or they're not as good as what they're doing. But to wrap it up, I found that time is the best way to approach that. So I hope I answered that question. If I didn't, please raise your hand and we can talk about it.
Okay, Laura, I don't have anyone raising their hands yet, but I do have another comment about the texting and emailing that we were discussing earlier.
Okay.
As once the send button is clicked, it's out there. Texting may be even worse. And this commenter says, I have asked coworkers and mentors to read a possible controversial email before sending a response.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that comment. That is such an important point. I have seen this repeatedly that especially with folks who grew up in this connected age, that they really don't get, in some cases, that once they hit that send button, it's gone. And that it might be very wise to step back and to proofread and to really think about what one is sending. I know that definitely in the world that I live in, which is the creation of medical products, everything that we prepare in the end is subject to scrutiny by regulators from either the federal government here or ministries of health elsewhere. So it's vitally important that we step back and say, do we really want that to be read out of context by someone who is totally unrelated to the organization and is going to judge the quality of our products and our design controls based on this communication? So yes, thank you. That is a point that we can bring to protégés. Thank you for raising that.
The next question goes back to who the ideal mentor is. And this comment says, ideally, the mentor is a PE who can review and recommend the protégé for licensing. This is difficult in the industrial companies. And how can we address the lack of PEs in industrial plants, which is maybe a larger issue than for today's discussion. But Laura, if you'd like to comment.
It is a larger issue, and I'm struggling with that also. We had one excellent engineer where I previously worked who was ready to be a PE. She took to engineering just naturally, and when it came time for the test, she aced it. But the problem then was getting, I think it's 3 engineers now that have to, and Courtney, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have to get 3 engineers.
Unfortunately, I don't know that, but you are probably right.
I should know this, and I apologize. I know it used to be you had to get 5 engineers, 1 of which was your supervisor, and 2 of which were PEs. I think it's not that severe anymore, but she had a real problem getting engineers. So what we did is 2 of us that were PEs, we worked with her separately to go over her work and peer-reviewed her work and discussed with her over a period of weeks to assure ourselves that she was understanding what she was doing. So we weren't, neither one of us supervised her, and she had to get her actual supervisor to sign that part of it. But we peer-reviewed her work independently, and in doing so, we're able to give her what she needed, and we were able to convince ourselves, based on hours of just interaction with her, that she was in fact competent in the profession. I think that's going to be a problem. I see some companies where there just isn't a licensed engineer. My thinking is that's something that probably ISPE is in a very good place to address. Again, I don't know the subtleties of the law, but what occurred to me is that through ISPE, people who join the organization and get involved with it are going to be interacting with professional engineers, and there should be some way that we can mentor them and judge their work without giving away something confidential in their organization, but satisfy ourselves that they have been mentored and that they do understand the profession. Again, it's a larger issue, and yes, I would look forward to talking about that in July at the convention.
All right, I think Laura's just secured herself a spot as a speaker at the convention.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Thank you, thank you. And it didn't take Kim Robinson and a glass of wine to talk me into this.
We have another comment that says, I had a boss or a / mentor who told me the following: what you send or do is public record. Before you do it, how would you feel if your comment and picture were on the front page of the Wall Street Journal? And I think that really goes back to the previous point about making sure you read it over before you click send.
Absolutely. That is a great point. Thank you. That is so succinct. Yes, absolutely. That's something we can pass along to our younger engineers, is that anything that they text or write, they should treat it as if it's going to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the Trib or something. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
And then this goes back to mentoring relationships. One person says, I would think that the supervisor would need to be a mentor in building a relationship. And then another person asks, do most mentoring relationships occur by the employer having a formal policy or program, such as an administrator determining that P.E. Smith is in charge of mentoring EIT Jones?
Great point. I've seen it both ways in different organizations. In some cases, there is a formal mentoring relationship, and the company runs it. I can think of 2 companies that are up here in the Chicago area where they do have that. More commonly, what I've observed is that the companies don't have a formal policy, and that it becomes informal. People seek out each other. Most likely, a protege will seek out a mentor, or a mentor will say, "Hey, I'd like to work with you." I've seen it both ways in organizations. I don't have a thought as to what is preferable. A lot depends on the culture of the company. So again, I hope that addressed your comment. If it didn't, raise your hand and we'll talk.
And then I have one more comment. or question, if I'm joining a new company and seeking a mentor, how much time/effort should I invest in carefully assessing and selecting an appropriate mentor based on doing recon and background/reputational checks on the possible candidate? And is choosing a bad or poor mentor something that should be completely avoided, or it could actually help your career in certain ways? For example, learn from that person's mistakes/style.
Oh, that is a wonderful question. Oh my gosh. We have one of the people that helped participate in preparing this is a recent graduate of Illinois Institute of Technology, and when she joined her current company, she actually interviewed 3 mentors and put them through an actual interview. What she did is she first looked at the organization chart to try to find 3 people that were in a spot in the organization where she thought she would like to get to someday. Then she checked out their backgrounds on LinkedIn. This was really brilliant the way she did it. She checked out their backgrounds on LinkedIn to get some sense of who they were, and then she approached them individually and interviewed them. Surprisingly, Megan was one of the people she interviewed, and Megan didn't make the cut, which I think Meg was crushed by, but this particular engineer wanted to take a different career path, and so she picked somebody a little bit more in line with where she wanted to go. But I would dare say that she probably spent maybe 30 hours on this over the course of maybe 6 weeks. So she put a lot of care into picking people to interview and then to interview them. I think it worked out well. At least I didn't get any negative feedback. So yeah, some people put some time into this.
Okay, I haven't received any other questions.
Does anybody want to comment on anything? Please raise your hand, and we can put you online and discuss. I really do want to know if there's any other points that you've seen in your careers that are worthwhile sharing with the group. Anyone? Okay.
I don't have anybody else raising their hand, though I did get another question.
Okay.
See that more female engineers are seeking out mentors.
Yeah, I would say yes. Part of it is that the Society of Women Engineers, SWE, really encourages this. And so I think part of it is that the professional society that so many women engineers have joined in college and continue with afterwards, it promotes this very actively. So there's an awareness of mentoring. I think that if the awareness of mentoring was maybe more widespread, I think it would balance out and be more consistent with the statistical balance of people in the workplace. Really, mentoring should be for everybody, and it should be at any age. There's no reason why someone who's mid-career and is thinking of moving into a different direction of their career shouldn't also be thinking about who could mentor them. And that person may actually be younger. So there doesn't have to be this age imbalance, and it definitely is something that that should be considered by everybody in the profession. So great, that's a great comment. Great point. Thank you.
And then one more question. Is there any harm for a young engineer to have several different specialty mentors, say one for ethical issues, one for social issues, one for technical, etc.?
Not at all. Not at all. There shouldn't be at all. And one last point that I think we bring up, especially with the ethical, is I would recommend that we all have an agreement with the people that we're either mentoring or that are mentoring us that whatever we say remains confidential. There does need to be that trust that we're going to share confidential, that we're going to hold in confidence what we discuss. Particularly in the case of ethical issues, because we may be talking about things where there's some doubt, and that confidence really opens up the space to really truly discuss this and work out the fine points of it. If anybody has any thoughts on the confidentiality issue, please jump in. But that's one last item I really would like to encourage. And I'm just going through some of the sources we use. And if that's it, I think we're coming up on 1 o'clock. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for your comments and questions. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you in July at the annual convention. Please come by and say hello if you see me walking around. If you see me avoiding Kim, if you see me dodging Kim, please come by and say hello as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you everyone for attending. We will be back in January where we will actually be meeting the second week because of the New Year's holiday. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to email me, CourtneyAdams@illinoisengineer.com. Thanks everyone and have a great day.